We are delighted to welcome the NINA spokesperson, Mr. Tony Nnadi, for a more detailed examination of today's topic, Anyoko and Tinubu's Constituent Assembly gambit to swallow our sovereignty. Sir, please, you have the floor.
Yeah, thank you. Welcome everybody once more to the town hall session of today. Congratulating everybody because it is what Nina set in motion that is driving the entire country at this time. Whether you are looking at the government or the young people who began to organize protests, or the patriots who have just regained their consciousness, because one will ask, where have they been since 1999 when this abomination was instituted? The Constitution 1999, Unitary Constitution for a Federal Union. Where have they been? Where were they in 2003, 4, 5 when we convened a meeting of the owners of Nigeria that became Pronaco? Where were they when Pronaco, finishing its business successfully, went to court under the aegis of MNN to raise this legitimacy question against that constitution formally in court? Where were all of them? Where were they when Ninas began to mobilize the owners of Nigeria beyond the consensus that had been built in Pronaco? And we just did it. We didn't just go gather to begin to hold meeting. It began with going nationality to nationality to wake them up into the danger we were all in, inviting them with their own positions for what they would have preferred if Nigeria were to be discussed by them. That is, make your positions, your charters, your drafts for how you will want to, exist, how you want to operate in your space. And if we were to be in a union, what will you prefer? That was what we went to do in Pronaco. We succeeded in getting a consensus of what they would prefer. The British didn't ask them that question. Lancaster House was just the politicians that the British had groomed that went to Lancaster House. The people were never invited into that discussion. Even by way of referendum, in terms of, we have written what we want, you come and say yes or no to it, which is totally inadequate, grossly inadequate for what the situation requires. But even that was not done all through these many years. And so we came to where, after the Lagos MNN declaration of June 30th, 2011, that's after the 2011 election, where this same caliphate said they were going to render Nigeria ungovernable if one of them did not become president. If Jonathan contested, in that electoral cycle, and they began to make it ungovernable, because the day the result was announced, that was the day they began to kill coppers in Bauchi. That was the first time they announced themselves as Boko Haram. They no longer believed in democracy. They no longer believed in anything, because one of them was not president. And we wobbled from there. It was that MNN legal declaration that mandated the nationalities to go and hold their solemn assemblies to announce to the outside world that our union had failed and that we were putting our acts together to reassert our sovereignties, to recover our sovereignties that Nigeria had been holding on to since 1914. And so, I'm touching on all of this to let us see clearly the criminality of jumping in from nowhere and studiously avoiding those who had done the research, who had done the work, who have placed on the table a clear pathway, a clear framework, a clear strategy for addressing the problems we're all seeing. And the reason we have to be more vigilant now is that the onslaught of Ninas, of the indigenous nationalities of Nigeria against that caliphate imposed constitution has landed the union into a pinfall. That is, that unitary Nigeria is now in a pinfall, and the instrument empowering it is in a chokehold. That 1999 constitution is in a chokehold. It is clinically dead. That is, it is brain dead as we speak. Because you look around the country, even the government, including the National Assembly that was pretending all the while, they all now acknowledge that Nigeria is not working, and that constitution is the reason it's not working. They all agree that it has to be replaced by something else. Where the problem begins is, what is that thing that will replace the one that's not working? The rational thing to do in that kind of a setting is to ask, what exactly, how did we get to where we are? Everybody can see the symptoms of what has happened from unitary constitutional arrangements, impositions. There's nobody still arguing that corruption is not reigning supreme. We can all see the corruption, that's symptom. Everybody can see the leadership failures. No debate about that. Even young people are seeing it. Everybody can see the impunity in which a minister can just walk away with 729 billion to say, yes, I gave it to Amajiri the other day. 729 billion, 29 billion. And then a sitting president can be talking about 30 trillion worth of ways and means. Ways and means. When you hear ways and means is that money that a sitting president can ask the central bank to release for some reason, that something that will not be discussed there. That is, find me 50 billion there, find me 500 billion. After we will tell the other people ways and means, because there are times there could be an emergency, like COVID could come, or some war may break out with the border with the next country. Something could happen, and the government there's no time to build the expenditure required to meet that need into a budget. And so you have an urgency to go take money and solve the problem. Yes, you can then raise what you call ways and means. Take the money and then get the authorization after. But when ways and means will be abused to the tune of 30 trillion in a country where, out of the 8 years of Muhammadu Buhari, there were times the entire budget did not come to 5 trillion. In the year, I remember when there was a budget they had done for 6 or 7 trillion, and then they were looking for loans, foreign loans, to be able to make it up, so that they can finance that budget. That would then tell you the gravity of what it is for a president to take away between himself and the central bank governor. That's why they're holding MFLA, so that they don't want anybody to hear all of how they did what they did. That's why they're holding him in the manner they're holding him. Not that he's innocent. He's the one that had to work with them to carry out this grand stealing, this grand robbery. And so I'm just saying that everybody can see the symptoms of corruption, the symptoms of failure of leadership, governance, and everything. Everybody can see the infrastructure that is in decay. Everybody can see the electoral malfeasances. That is to say, you can't say people get to power on account of the vote you cast. So those ones are the symptoms. If you want to solve that problem, the rational thing to do would be to say, how did we come into all of this? And that was what Ninas did. To say, yes, there's corruption, but why? Anyone you ask the first why, it will give you an answer. You take that answer, ask another why. Okay, there's corruption. Oh, officials are stealing money. But why is it so? Why have we not been able to stop them? Then you begin to see that the Constitution grants them immunity. the Constitution gives them the spare key to the treasury. The Constitution of Nigeria absolves them of responsibility towards the citizen. And if you think it's a conjecture, Section 6, subsection 6C, absolve the government of responsibility towards you. All the good things that should accrue to you as citizen of Nigeria are listed in Chapter 2 of that Constitution. Security, welfare, equal treatment, good school, good hospital, good road, everything, electricity, everything that will make life, possible for you. Equal treatment, non-discrimination, everything is in that Chapter 2 listed for you. But Section 6, subsection 6C of that same Constitution renders it non-justiciable. In layman's language, makes it discretionary. It's not a legal obligation in your favor. It should have been, but those who drafted the Constitution did not intend that you get anything at all. And so, by that Section 6, subsection 6C, the government is absolved of responsibility towards you in every manner you can imagine. And so, they don't owe you obligation. Then you come to the appropriation provisions where the spare keys of the treasury are left in the hands of the heads of the executive branch. The president can take all the money in the central coffers. The governors can take all the money in their states, just because of the loose appropriation provisions crafted by the criminals operating the criminal enterprise. Then you come to Section 308 that grants them immunity in all the time they're in office. And so, it is in knowing all of that, that you can then put your finger on the real ultimate cause of the problem. That the Constitution provides XYZ that makes it possible for ABC to happen. They don't owe you obligation. They can take all the money in the treasury, and you cannot ask them question why they're doing it. You then ask another why. Who wrote this kind of Constitution and these provisions? That is when you begin to come back to the people that toppled the federal constitutional arrangements we had and imposed the unitary arrangement by brigandage. You will then see the caliphate and their military wing. You will then see the date in November of 1975 that Murtala Mohammed, who was the effective head of that military wing of the caliphate as at that time. Remember, it was the same Murtala Mohammed that decapitated the Federal Constitution of Nigeria when in July of 1966, himself and his confederates declared Araba. They declared secession from the Federation of Nigeria, moved the capital to Ilorin. But for the British High Commissioner that jumped into the fray to say, hey, don't go, there's oil in the east. They had left the Union in secession. From that night, they killed the Ironsi, killed all the military officers, their colleagues in the Nigerian army, sleeping in the same barracks with them. They blew the beagle at night. The beagle is the summoning instrument. When you hear the beagle, you jump out of your bed, get into your fatigue, that is your battle gear, and run to the parade ground. They blew the beagle. Everybody ran to the parade ground, leaving their wives and children in the quarters. It was at that parade ground that they separated them in the dead of the night, 1 a.m., 2 a.m., across several locations. And they executed the Igbo officers and men point blank. Then went in that strength into the city and began to kill them. Kill Igbo. That was the instruction. Kill all the Igbo you see. And it went on from that July throughout August, throughout September of that 1966. And it was that same Murtala Mohammed who had initiated that decapitation of the Federation of Nigeria on the 29th of July in 1966 that also toppled the government on the 29th of July in 1975, overtaking Gowon. And then the first task he gave out, talking about the patriots, the first task Murtala Mohammed gave out after overthrowing Gowon in July of 1975 of a constitution by which they will be handing over power to civilians in the transition they had announced to continue from where Gowon stopped. Take note of what I've just said. That is why we are tackling Chief Emeka Nyoko and his co-travelers and their host, Bola Tinubu. They have just initiated one more time the very thing that Murtala Mohammed did in 1975, that landed us in 1979 ditch, from which we have not recovered since 1999. They decided among themselves what will be the constitution for Nigeria, having decapitated the agreed constitution that made us a federation, in which the federating units, the 4 regions, had their constitutions, were the owners of their assets and all the powers to work those assets. They had confiscated all those things since 1967, when Gowon truncated and fractured those 4 regions into 12 states. And the illicit federal government that emerged from that 67 took over the assets of those regions and the powers of those regions. That is what they loaded into the exclusive list that emerged from the 1979 reinforcement, but which was initiated by Murtala Mohammed through the drafting of constitution before the convening of a discussion. What Emeka Anyoko had gone to tell Tinubu to do on the 9th of August in 2024 is exactly that same process of, say, let us call a constituent assembly. In 1975, it was Murtala Mohammed commissioning Rotimi Williams, the founding chairman of the Patriot. Because if you say Patriot, Patriot of what? The founding chairman of the Patriot was the one that, for a fee, very big fee, landed us into this mess. The one that took over from him, Ben Nwabeze, unfortunate, is late now. The history is there. The records are there. Murtala Mohammed commissioned Rotimi Williams. Rotimi Williams brings in Ben Nwabeze as the expert to help him do the detail, what needs to be done, how he can work. And Nwabeze did it watertight because it was a blank check. We'll pay you whatever we want. Then there was oil money. Just do it for us. I'm able to tell you this because the first person Rotimi Williams went to in search of how to do that contract of drafting our damnation for the caliphate for a fee was Prince Tani Moshe Bankole Oki. Prince Tani Moshe Bankole Oki, who was Rotimi Williams' contemporary. They went to study law in England about the same period, and then so they've been knowing themselves from what you could call childhood. And being a brilliant lawyer, one of the best draftsmen, Rotimi Williams ran to him, say, "Hey, I have this big brief. Let's go and do it. The fee is whatever we put in as our invoice." But when Bankole Oki looked at the instruction, what is it to be written into that constitution, into that draft? He told Rotimi Williams to please not do this transaction for these people, because Bankole Oki was telling me this. He became one of our plaintiffs in the suit challenging the constitution. He was 90 years at the time he joined us in that suit. He was chairman of Nigerian, the body of senior advocates in Nigeria. So he wasn't just another lawyer. And for somebody who had been inside the innermost workings of government, he was the one that, as permanent secretary of the Ministry of Defense, carved out the Nigerian Air Force from what used to be the military, the air wing of the Nigerian Army. He was Bankole Oki as permanent secretary in the Ministry of Defense that carved out your Nigerian Air Force that you have to this date. So he's not a stranger to how Nigeria was formed. And so, back to the question of the reason I'm giving the reason I'm going into this detail, and I'm not telling you what I heard from the grapevine. Bankole Oki told me this in cause of the challenge we mounted against the foundation of that constitution, the illegitimate, the illicit foundation upon which we are building the Union of Nigeria. And so, Bankole Oki rejected that largesse, that big fee that Murtala Mohammed would have been paying him if he did the job. But Rotimi Williams then went away in search of who else. And that was how he went to the University of Lagos. This young teacher, law lecturer called Ben Wabeze, more than glad. They went into the task and drafted the constitution governed by that instruction material that turned Nigeria into unitarianism. And if anybody thought they didn't know what they were doing, go and listen again to that clip from that inauguration of that Williams committee in 1975, where Murtala Mohammed was saying that the British ran Nigeria as a unitary entity, but when they were going, because of our diversity, we embraced a federal arrangement, but that it hasn't, somehow it has collapsed and we need to go back. So it was clear in the mind of Murtala Mohammed that they wanted to go back to centralized control of the entire structure, of the entire system, so that the caliphate stepped, by that manipulation, the caliphate stepped into the shoes of the British as the owners of Nigeria, with every power they will require. And so, Ben Wabeze was the second chairman of the Patriots after Rotimi Williams. The third chairman of the Patriots is Chief Emeka Anyoko. And so when he goes to the villa, addressing the media, say, hey, you know who the Patriots are, as if they are the ones watching the back of everybody. They were the ones that plunged us into this mess. Otherwise, let Chief Emeka Anyoko tell us where he has been since from the time Nigeria fell into this darkness. He worked for the Commonwealth. He worked for the British throughout his life. Why is he now the champion of how we are going to recover from what the British imposed on us? And in doing that, one will have been prepared to extend the benefit of doubt to anybody else, but not a diplomat at that level that will not understand that a federation does not function with one constitution, and that Nigeria is in the mess it is today because we corralled everybody into one constitution. And we are struggling for 25 years to topple that constitution and return our sovereignties to the owner so that we can work out fresh protocols amongst ourselves. At the point we have succeeded, Chief Emeka Anyoko jumps out from nowhere to go to Tinubu, and they are all agreeing to go and draft constitution without a negotiation of the sovereignties that have been detained for 110 years now, having all agreed that the Nigeria is not working. Having all agreed that the reason it's not working is because we have a unitary constitution. Having all agreed that we need to depart from that. What is the difficulty in going further to agree that those who were alleged to have submitted their sovereignties and agreed upon the terms of the union, that is sovereignty to form a union, that's that preamble. Anybody who wants to know what Nina says is wrong with what Emeka Anyoko has gone to submit to Tinubu should listen. Go to the preamble of that Constitution, 1999. There are 3 very heavy falsehoods that are responsible for where we are as a union today. The first is the claim that we the people, that is, we the sovereign constituent component, we the Yoruba, we the Ijaw, have firmly, the second is that they say we have firmly and solemnly resolved to live in unity forever as one indivisible and indissoluble country. That's the second false claim. And the third false claim is that we therefore made and gave unto ourselves that constitution. Those are the 3 things. Because it is in that we the people that the British evaded the owners of the land at the time they crafted their 1914 union. We the people were not involved. They went to Lancaster House, they did not come back to the we the people. It was the politicians they had groomed that they took to Lancaster House, and they agreed whatever they agreed. And then eventually, even that marginal discussion, because what Nigeria died at birth, Nigeria was stillborn because the British deliberately left the guns in the hands of Ahmadu Bello, the North. So it was incomplete decolonization to that extent. The British deliberately left the minorities in the belly of the majorities. Western region had the Urobo, the Edo, and all of those who became Midwest, and they left them deliberately in the belly of the Yoruba majority Western region. They left the Ijaw, the Anang, the Efik, and all the rest, you call the Eastern minorities, in the belly of the Igbo-dominated, Eastern region. In the North, they left the entire Middle Belt in the belly of the Caliphate North. And so, for those whose sovereignties were left in the care of others who were considered the majority, it was incomplete decolonization. They never got back their sovereignty at the time the British left. It was in the course of trying to beat down Awolowo that they allowed the Midwest to go from Western region. It was in the course of trying to beat down Eastern region that they allowed what you now call the Niger Delta to go from the Eastern region. Never in search of how we build up ourselves, in search of how we progress, in search of how we make our society as we want it. It's always in the service of that foreign interest that own Nigeria, the suzerainty that is sitting on our sovereignty. Their local agent, their chief local agent being the Caliphate. And then the willing tools they recruited from the alliance of 1967 they had to form in order to beat down the owners of the economic assets they wanted very badly. That's what we are building upon to this date. And so, it is because Chief Emeka Anyoko and his patriots who plunged us into this mess in the first place are now jumping over the first 2 major necessities. If we are to solve Nigeria today, we must identify who we the people are. That is 70% of the entire matter. We must recognize them as the owners of the lands that are federated, that are aggregated into the Union of Nigeria. They must be the ones discussing, like Bola Ige tried to educate us a long time ago. It must be the owners of the lands, the sovereign constituent components of Nigeria, the peoples of Nigeria, that will discuss and agree. They will have to be identified, they will have to be discussed, they will have to discuss and agree. And then it is in the 3rd layer that you begin to talk about codification of the agreement. That is what becomes constitution. You don't begin to write anything in form of draft except you have done the first 2 things. Why is Chief Emeka Anyoku jumping into drafting of constitution when you have not identified the people who are going to federate, when you have not allowed them to discuss and negotiate their sovereignty? That is what is at issue. And that is why we're not going to touch, NINAS is not going to touch anything from what they are doing, because they are very clear-minded in what they are doing. We had engaged them sufficiently. We have no further patience left. If they are in doubt or in confusion about any part of what we say should be done, let them go to the Constitutional Force Majeure Proclamation as published in the Guardian newspaper of January 20, 2021. We gave the federal government of the time 90 days to go and examine that proposition. Government is a continuum, and Bola Tinubu cannot claim he wasn't part of the APC government that was the ruling party at the time. He boasted that he was the one that brought Buhari to become president. Throughout the 8-year tenure of Buhari, there was no day that Tinubu was not part of what they were doing. And even if he says he did it, he went on leave, he was in some kind of hibernation, he didn't know. The publication is still there. It's on our website, www.ninasvoice.org. They can call Guardian newspaper to give them, the link is there all over the place. But they can ask the Guardian newspaper to give them a copy. The government of the day was given a copy, published in 4 pages as unedited advertorial. Pages 38, 39, 40, and 41 of the Guardian newspaper of January 20, 2021. And so, in August of 2024, anybody in Abuja who is saying he doesn't know what NINAS is talking about, why is NINAS quarreling with everything? National Assembly jumped out the other time trying to say they are going to write another constitution. We told them no. Olisabaka gathered them in December of 2023, guiding them on how to go and write another one from the back door, Appian Way. We told them no. Then they went to Colloquium of Lagos to get Emeka Anyoku to come and present eminent people's view on a matter as delicate as this. And in that force majeure proclamation, there were 128 signatories, with the heads of the the ethnic what you could call whatever Ohanese is to the, whatever Afenifere is to the Yoruba, whatever the Pandef is to the middle to the Niger Delta, and whatever the middle belt, they were all their heads, their presiding heads in that period, all signed. There are many generals on that list, retired, the ones who are witness to what went wrong, 128 of them. And so, such a proposition that was transmitted to government, to all the diplomatic missions in Nigeria, to the United Nations Security Council, to the UN Trusteeship Council. If anybody is sitting in Abuja pretending they do not know, that is their own choice, and they're going to live with the consequences of burying their heads in the sand, because everything that has gone wrong with the land is flowing from that constitution. What we need to do to rescue ourselves from the damnation of it all, NINAS has placed on the table step by step, from start to finish. Because those who want to go and start drafting constitution, and we ask them, for which country are you making this draft? He then goes to say it will be 3 representatives elected democratically on non-party basis from 36 states. 36 states. We asked Chief Emeka Anyoku, how did we come from a federation of 4 regions to a federation of 36 states that will now be the basis of representation in the place of discussion? What is the impossibility of identifying? There's no piece of land in Nigeria that the owners are not known. Yoruba land knows its boundaries. Ijo land knows its boundaries. Igbo land, TV land, Jukun land, every portion of Nigeria. Why are you not interested in dealing with the owners of the land? What is the meaning of Abia State? What is the meaning of Imo State? Who from those places were on the table the day you were carving out those things? Like Berlin Conference carved out Africa for their own purposes. That's how we came about these 36 states. My allegiance is not to any of these states. The Yoruba allegiance is to Yoruba land, whether anybody accepts it or not. The Igbo allegiance is to Igbo land. If Nigeria is sucking their blood, I can assure you, and I assure you again, that their allegiance is not to that Nigeria, starting with the one you are hearing his voice. That Nigeria that is designed to feed on my blood, I owe it a duty to put it to death. I owe it a duty to myself and the generation unborn to put that unitary Nigeria to death. So those who want to build it should get ready. Those who swear to defend and uphold the constitution that make me slave should get ready. We're on the same construction site. More than 70%, 75% of those on that construction site are struggling to pull down what you are building there, because you are building an architecture that makes them slave in their land. That's why Nigeria is not going nowhere. That's why Nigeria has not gone anywhere. Because it has become a union of death. A federation is supposed to be a symbiosis. You have better security, you have better economy because of the economy of scales. But the day the federation becomes a toxic parasitism, like Nigeria has become for the constituent components of Nigeria, I tell you, that federation is at an end. Luckily for us, it's not a mystery. We have on the table the constitution that was imposed to make it so. And we have taken steps, measured steps, across the last 25 years from 1999 to build a consensus against that constitution and against those who impose it on us, and they are willing to support us from our midst. So the political parties that are running their democracy on the basis of that constitution, they are your first line of enemies. The media that is pretending that is all about leadership, avoiding this discussion. Again, when the flood comes, it will not spare them. The church leaders that are mobilizing for PVC, people are discussing 2027 election. On which to govern which Nigeria? Where is that Nigeria to govern now? Under which constitution are you going to be going to that election and building that democracy? But for the ones who go to vote, the ones who go to renew their damnation every 4 years by way of voting, oh, it's our turn. It's our brother that will become president. I'm sure the Yoruba is not living in another world now. They are buying the same prices as everybody for food. They are buying the same prices as everybody for petrol. They are not safer than anybody else because Fulani marauders will come and behead them. They beheaded the Kitty Kings the other day. As it is raining in the east, that's in the middle belt, that's in the west, under this constitution. And so the fact that there's a Yoruba president there today has not changed anything for Yoruba people. Jonathan was there, it didn't change for Yoruba people. Obasanjo was there before, it didn't change for Yoruba people. You had the other fellow from Kano the other time saying that everything put together, that they are the ones poorest, most insecure, but they've been in power longer than everybody else. So what is the purpose of going to renew the life of that constitution? And therefore, we have touched all of what we set out to do. Where are we now? Ninas is saying that it is the defeat of the 1999 constitution that has brought everybody into this frenzy of looking for replacement. But Ninas insists that the 5-point proposition that have been tabled since 2020 is the mechanism, is the most potent mechanism, the safest mechanism for arresting this drift into anarchy. And what are those 5 points? Can we not now acknowledge, like South Africa did in 1990, that this constitution, unitary constitution of Nigeria, is the source of all our miseries and our woes? That is our first demand. That is our first proposition. Can we not now say and commit to decommissioning it, like South Africa did in that one broadcast in 1990, that yes, this is the problem, apartheid. The solution is to decommission completely, wholesale. Has it not come to where we can say, we have done elections 7 times over, it hasn't solved our problem. Let us now suspend the journey to any further elections and solve this problem. If we do not halt, if we do not force to a stop the plan for another election, presidential election, I mean, I'm not talking about the that will happen soon or that will happen. I'm not talking about off-season and scattered elections that they deliberately stagger to make sure that the INEC is doing something throughout the year. Is their plan to keep you busy? Oh, PDP must leave, APC must survive. We are talking about the general elections that happen once in 4 years. If those who are crying about hunger in Nigeria today, if those who are crying about insecurity and the beheading happening to them today, if those who are crying about the economic assets that Nigeria is holding, against their will, if they will not find the courage, if they will not find the wisdom to join in saying we cannot proceed with this constitution that render us slaves in our land, that render us hungry in our homes, that render us the poverty capital of the world, if they are not willing to do this little bit that Ninas is inviting them to do, to reject further national elections under that constitution, and that rejection is now, what then happens? Demand for transition, that we have to go and rework that constitution. What do we need in place of the one we are rejecting? We have already distilled it. We have already distilled what it wouldn't take 3 months if people wake up to what we are saying. But if they insist that it must be their turn, like Peter Obi and his co-travelers try to go to take their Igbo turn at presidency, look at where we are now. Look at where we are now. It was because Peter Obi wanted to be president, and the Igbo who refused to listen to what the problem was, joined him. Then the rest of the people who have been talking about leadership, when the constitution is the problem, how did we come about bad leadership? Constitution. How did we come about corruption that Peter Obi is coming to cure? Constitution. Why do you leave the tap on? If Peter Obi had been declared president, will it become the constitution to settle the question we raised from that preamble? How will his presidency become the answer to that falsehood of we the people? How will his presidency become the falsehood? Become the answer to the second falsehood of the fact that we have agreed to be in union forever? How will his presidency turn the falsehood of we writing and giving ourselves that constitution? So it won't solve. It will not change the 36 states we shouldn't have been. It won't change the several and several local government areas they smuggled into the place, and we are now financing 812 governments every month, borrowing 40 years into the future to finance the bureaucracy of now. It is because they are dishonest. All of those who belong to the political parties contesting elections under this constitution are the primary enemies of the people and peoples of Nigeria. All the political parties subscribe to that constitution. Is 25 years not long enough to explain it to them? If they have not understood it up till now, they will wake up under the rubble of their foolishness, of their ignorance, of their dishonesty, because the owners of the sovereignty are not. You heard Emeka Anyaku saying that it is the unity of Nigeria that is paramount to them. Ninas is saying it is the survival of the trapped constituent components of Nigeria. Those trapped in the carcass of that defunct Federation of Nigeria that died since 1967. It is the peoples of Nigeria that we're concerned about. We're not concerned about their stupid Nigeria, their unitary Nigeria, their Nigeria, the union of death. No. That's not our concern. But that is what Chief Emeka Anyaku talked about as their principal concern, the unity of Nigeria and the survival of Nigeria. We are talking about the survival of the peoples of Nigeria. There are two different transactions. What you need to do to keep Nigeria going demands the blood of the Nigerians. What you need to keep Nigeria of unitary is a monster that feeds on the blood of the innocent. Every day you keep this Nigeria, it requires no less than 5,000 lives. 5,000 lives every day to keep going. And so, yesterday it was the Ijaw that they had to massacre in Odi. Next time it was in Zakebia. Before then it was the Igbo. Prior to that it was the chief. Long time before it was on the streets of Ibadan that Nigeria had to massacre to feed that monster. Today the entire Middle Belt is contributing the blood that is required. And then the snacks, you know, the Nigeria snacks on blood. The snacks in between are the ones your kidnappers are doing. Your all kinds of other, you know, and then the young people that die in the desert, struggling to get to Europe, that drown in the Mediterranean. These are all the snacks that monster, takes. Blood of people who should have been growing happily in their country. And so, where we are now is simple. They are trying to do what they can do to sustain what they are sharing. We must do all of what we've drawn the line. That line is that constitution. Those who are not standing with us to say the first line of discussion is to acknowledge that we can no longer continue to build a union and a democracy on a constitution that render us slaves. The second thing that must be said is that we must go to transition now. Anybody who does not publicly commit to no further elections under this constitution, transition now. Emeka Anyaku, Tinubu, protesters of end bad governance. Anybody who does not mount the rooftops today in 2024 to say that constitution is the problem, to say that we have to decommission it, to say that we have to suspend further national elections under it, to say that we must go now to transition to rework in 2 stages that will identify the owners who will then have to negotiate. Anybody who is not saying that is part of the problem. It doesn't matter how you speak it in English or how you lament it in your local language. That is where we are now. And I would think that we need to understand the meaning of what has happened. The people in Abuja do not understand the meaning of constitution. So they're thinking it is the booklet that Olisa Bakoba was guiding them to go and write. Constitution is union agreement. Where we are now is a very good place. That constitution is dead. Our sovereignty is back on the table. If we listen a little more to ourselves, everybody will take back their own and we go to another meeting. We have kept the door open for the government to transmute and transform itself into a transitioning arrangement, a transitioning process. They become a transitional authority. To manage what we call nominal governance in the period, the sovereign constituent components of Nigeria will be discussing their union, whether they want to carry on or they want to disperse from that union. like Kodesa happened in South Africa between 1990 and 1994. NINAS is the only group still making any kind of accommodation to the criminals that have held us hostage all these many years, to say, let us close our eyes to what happened yesterday for the sake of orderliness, to avoid anarchy. Stay where you are. We're not if the task is to remove people from government house, any group of 2, 3, 4 soldiers can organize it. It won't take 1 month. If it is to sack government, that's not what NINAS is discussing. What NINAS is discussing is the constitution by which people are ruining the lives of others. And we have been extremely patient. We have been painstaking, explaining every step of the way. But those who gather in the refuge camp of regional renegades called Abuja are imagining that our sovereignty has now become theirs. That is, they are now the owners and custodians of our sovereignty to now sit and write constitution for us in Abuja. It's a tragic mistake. The owners of the sovereignty don't owe you any visit to Abuja. I saw some people. Many people were asking us, oh, now that Emeka Anyoko has gone to meet Tinubu, why not NINAS go and make sure that we don't owe them any visit to Abuja. The owners of the sovereignty, they have put in black and white before the global community, before the federal government, before all stakeholders, before the peoples of Nigeria, to say, this is what we have to do. Unless that gathering in Abuja commits to solving this problem, there's really nothing to discuss with them, because remember that NINAS has its own autonomous process, independent of whatever anybody else is doing, to get at its own defined destination. That destination is to return the sovereignty of all of those who are corralled into Nigeria against their will, by toppling that constitution that holds on to their sovereignty. And with the collapse of that constitution, everybody will take back their portions, which will include their land, their economic assets, and the right to defend themselves in that space. Remember, it is that dead constitution that forbade them from touching arms. Your arms and ammunition are on that exclusive list. They are going to take charge of every item on that exclusive list on their own terms if you refuse to come to. So this is the time to decide whether you surrender unconditionally to those 5 points of proposition. Nothing will be added, nothing will be subtracted. Anybody who wants to add, anybody who wants to subtract, will have to convince us that that constitution is not the problem, that we can keep it for another season and go to another election, that the owners of the sovereignty are not the ones to discuss, that is Abuja. Those are the things you can bring now and persuade us to live where we are. But if you can't bring a superior argument to what we already have in black and white, I tell you, the sovereignty of the peoples of Nigeria, inalienable. They don't owe you any explanation for what they do with it, how they recover it. Their right to self-determination, inalienable. They don't need to talk to you before they exercise, before they assert it. They say assert. It's not to be. You are not to be convinced before they. So you sit in Abuja blowing your siren, and the governors that come to support them from various areas, I tell you, they are living on borrowed time. The constitution from where they draw power and authority is dead and gone. The only reason is still they are still able to gather every month and share money is because the people who are living in that bondage have not a critical mass have not woken up to this new reality. The prison gate is wide open, and NINAS has its programs for how that joint jailbreak will be enacted. I think we have covered enough for one session. Thank you for listening.